chapter 16.
Of what?
Deuteronomy. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to those who are watching online, and look forward to hearing from you. Some of you chat in while we're doing this, and I try to respond as we go along, just like I do to people who are already in the class. My name is Dennis Levin. I'm, so far, for a little while longer, the pastor at Queen Street United Methodist Church here in Kinston, North Carolina, and we welcome you to our Bible study. Today we're going to delve into chapter 16 of the book of Deuteronomy, and this has to do with festivals, by and large. Okay, in verse 9, we're going to pick up at verse 9. We just did Passover. The first part of the chapter has to do with Passover, and that led to a rather lengthy discussion last week. Let's see if we can just blast through some of these celebrations. Okay, the Festival of Weeks. You shall count 7 weeks. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time the sickle is first put to the standing grain. Then you shall keep the Festival of Weeks for the Lord your God, contributing a free will offering in proportion to the blessing that you have received from the Lord your God. Rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levite residents in your towns, as well as the strangers, the orphans, the widows who are among you, at the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt and diligently observe these statutes. Okay, what is that? It's a celebration of the harvest. And it doesn't say what proportion of the harvest is going to be dedicated to the Lord. It says a proportion based on how good the harvest was. So it's not a set amount. It's if you had a good crop, you bring more. If you had a lousy crop, you bring less. But you always do this. And it's going to be 7 weeks after you begin the harvest. So they're giving you plenty of time to gather it all in and get it accounted for. I don't know how they did the recording of how good the crop was or not. But anyway, this is just a celebration. It's like a little bit like our Thanksgiving. Okay? But there are a lot of things in there that are left out. They don't really tell you a whole lot about how to celebrate it or how to present the offering. But they do say that you've got to do this at the place the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Where would that be? Jerusalem, right. So as far as this being on the Exodus, you know, you could say it was at the tabernacle would be the place, okay? But this gives a much more settled account. And one of the reasons why you do it in Jerusalem is so that everybody, no matter what tribe you're in, you have to come to Jerusalem, to the central government, to the central place of worship, to give account. Okay? Again, it's a boosting of the centralization of religion and ultimately of government. The Festival of Booths. You shall keep the Festival of Booths for 7 days, when you have gathered in the produce from your threshing floor and your winepress. There's another one of these Thanksgiving things, kind of, okay? Rejoice during your festival, you and your sons and your daughters, your male, female slaves, as well as the Levite, the strangers, the orphans, the widows, resident in your town. 7 days you shall keep the festival for the Lord your God at the place that the Lord your God will choose, for the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all your undertakings, and you shall surely celebrate. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, at the festival of unleavened bread, at the festival of weeks, at the festival of booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. All shall give as they are able, according to the blessing of the Lord your God that he has given you. Why would you want all of the males to be present in the capital?
Census.
Yeah, it's a census. It's a way of registering for the draft.
Uh-oh.
But that's seriously what they're doing. They're counting how many men they have available for military service. And that's why they come 3 times a year. They want to keep up with it. And it's an order, just like registering for selective service is an order. This is the same thing, and this is the reason why they do it. And you do it during the festivals. And I guess, you know, they kind of blend in one of these governmental requirements along with the religious requirements as an economic way of doing it. But the Festival of Booths is to remind them, and this is another reason why this is not really something that took place during the Exodus itself. The Festival of Booths is a time when people set up booths on the roofs of their houses to remind them of when they were in tents in the Exodus. Okay? When I was in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, it was very, very common for people to have these huge, lavish houses, palatial houses, and then they had a walled-in compound in the back of the house, behind the house, and in that compound they would have a Bedouin tent. Okay? And this is to remind them of their Bedouin roots. And they love it. It's like, you know, every kid wants to be a cowboy, you know, every Arab wants to be a Bedouin, and they, and these tents are something. It's not something you get in Walmart, boys and girls. These tents are massive, and they have rooms in them. Okay, there's places for men and places for women, and they don't meet in the same place in the tent. The tents are carpeted with oriental rugs worth thousands and thousands of dollars each one. They have big screen TVs. They've got all the things that Bedouins don't typically carry with them. But it's an interesting culture. I remember going out to a rifle range in the middle of nowhere. This is like Lawrence of Arabia territory with the sand dunes and everything. And there are these 2 dunes that kind of came together into a valley, and in that valley was a Bedouin tent. And right next to that Bedouin tent, now I'm telling you, no roads, nothing, okay? I had a Humvee, that's how I got around. But next to that Bedouin tent was a Mercedes-Benz. Yep. Oh, I'll give you another story, okay? We were with the 82nd Airborne, and we were on the attack, okay? And it was getting towards night, and we came to, our maps were totally wrong. The terrain features on the maps were totally off. And we suddenly came upon this wadi. A wadi is a sharp depression, really sharp depression. So it's like cliff walls, okay? Down maybe, I'd say it was 150 feet down into this flat area. And there was a goat trail that went down the wall of the wadi, and we had a huge military convoy that came down that wadi on that goat trail. And down in the bottom of this wadi, off to the side, all by itself, and the wadi, by the way, had grass. It was amazing. We never saw grass except down there. And down there with the grass there was a Bedouin tent. And it's a Bedouin tent. And so the guy comes out of his tent. He's got some daughters. He's got some sheep out there. He's got some camels out there. Okay, and as soon as he saw the 82nd Division descending on his Bedouin encampment, they gathered all the animals and took them into the tent, and he left his daughters outside.
Oh my gosh.
We've got to work on his priorities anyway.
You know, right here in Kinston, over on Stockton Road,
Yeah.
I have a friend who lives there.
Mhm.
And across the street from her is a Middle Eastern family. She said that the women,
Yeah.
you know, have the full
Yeah.
outfit. They have taken cinder blocks and blocked in their backyard.
Right.
And she couldn't figure out why they did it.
Oh, they did that because if they can wall in the backyard, then the women can go out there without their burqas.
That's what I told her.
Right.
That's what I told her.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But it does look weird. I mean, all these cinder blocks built,
The contrasts over there are just amazing.
yeah.
They really are. But yeah, they do. I mean, women are not allowed out in public without a burqa in some parts. Now, Saudi Arabia is getting a lot more liberal because they're wanting more tourists. But there are places like if you go to like Iran, a woman not wearing her burqa could be executed for it. So they have a lot of women in prison right now because they weren't wearing their headscarves, you know. And if they were wearing a headscarf and you could still see some hair, you could be arrested.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah. A little, you know, from our standpoint, not so. But anyway, it's considered immodest. All right. Okay. Municipal, easy for me to say. Municipal judges and officers. You shall appoint judges and officials throughout your tribes in all the towns that the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall render just decisions for the people. You must not distort justice. You must not show partiality. You must not accept bribes, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. Justice and only justice you shall pursue, so that you may live and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you. So they have high standards for judges, okay? And these are the kind of standards that you'd want in any society. There are very few societies that have those standards. And occasionally we'll run across a judge in this country. And if we do run across a judge in this country like that, typically speaking, in most places, that judge is in big trouble. All right, now this one is interesting. This has to do with sacred pillars and poles are forbidden. You shall not plant any tree as a sacred pole beside the altar that you make for the Lord your God, nor shall you set up a stone pillar, things that the Lord your God hates. Why does God hate poles and pillars?
The actual pole?
Yeah. Right.
It says because they would worship the Asherah pole.
Yeah, they would
instead of
worship.
worshiping God.
They would, and those Asherah poles were actually phallic symbols. And so that's it's part of their fertility cult. And they didn't want any altar used for the worship of Yahweh to have any other implication nearby. Okay? So, and this is another part of Josiah's reform. One of the things that's characteristic of Josiah's reform is that he went around tearing all these poles down and killing anybody who worshipped there, especially the officiants. He was ruthless when it came to that, and we'll see more of that too as we go along. Okay, this is chapter 17. You must not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep that has a defect, anything seriously wrong that is abhorrent to the Lord your God. If there is found among you in one of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, a man or woman, thank you for that, who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God and transgresses his covenant by going to serve other gods and worshiping them, whether the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have forbidden. By the way, that ties into a prohibition in Christianity for astrology. Okay, so astrology is considered to be a pagan alternative to Christian dependence on the Lord.
Why?
Because you're looking to the stars for answers instead of instead of asking God. You're going to an alternate source, and it's almost a form of worship. It is a form of worship, actually.
Studying the stars?
No, getting answers from the stars for the questions of
okay.
life. Yeah,
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
your horoscope.
yeah,
Yeah.
horoscope.
Yeah, not
Right.
astronomy.
Not astronomy. That's different.
Okay.
Okay, that's an actual science.
Okay.
Okay, in astronomy, we're
I'm
just
old and get mixed up easy.
yeah, me too.
It's best not to say anything.
It's best not to say yes.
Yeah,
At
when I
least,
was
at
growing
least,
up,
at least nothing that calls attention to it, right?
we weren't supposed, I mean, you weren't supposed to look at your horoscope. It was like a bad thing to do.
It is. It is. I have had situations where this family was an actual demon situation, and this family had done a number of things that opened them up to evil influence, and one of the things they had was an astrological guide, a book, and it was very old, but it's just one of those things that you can do things to invite evil into your house, and you get seriously into astrology, and that can do it. Okay. Where am I now? I'm in 17. Okay. And if it is reported to you, or you hear of it, and you make a thorough inquiry, and the charges prove true, that such an abhorrent thing has occurred in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or that woman who has committed this crime, and you shall stone the man or woman to death. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, the death sentence shall be executed. A person must not be put to death on the evidence of only 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first raised against the person to execute the death penalty, and after that, the hands of all the people, so you shall purge the evil from your midst. That's Josiah's reform. Okay? Now you can see how something like this can be manipulated very easily. And we saw that, all through the Middle Ages with witch trials and stuff like that. A lot of which were designed simply to confiscate the property of the person that they were accusing. These things are subject to corruption, and how do you prove a charge like that? Well, a lot of the stuff is made up. Women who practiced medicine were easily vulnerable to an accusation of witchcraft. And boy, I'll tell you, we had some pretty stupid, ignorant monks like in the Middle Ages pulling this stuff off. But it seems like anytime something like this happened, it worked to the benefit of the institutional church. Surprise, surprise. Okay? All right. Judicial role of priests and judges. If a judicial decision is too difficult for you to make between one kind of bloodshed and another, that's murder or manslaughter kind of thing. And we've just seen that. Okay. Any such matters of dispute in your towns, then you shall immediately go to the place that the Lord your God will choose, where you shall consult with the Levitical priest and the judge who is in office in those days, and they shall announce to you the decision in the case. Carry out exactly the decision that they announce to you from the place that the Lord will choose, diligently observing everything they instruct you. You must carry out fully the law that they interpret for you, the ruling that they announce to you. Do not turn aside from the decision that they announce to you, either to the right or to the left. As for anyone who presumes to disobey the priest appointed to minister there to the Lord your God, or the judge, that person shall die. So you shall purge the evil from Israel. All the people will hear and be afraid, and will not act presumptuously again. Presumptuously again. Okay. Now, why did why were there witchcraft trials in the Middle Ages? Well, the initial stuff about that comes from this kind of statement in the Pentateuch. Okay? And the idea was that if anybody is doing this, they are inviting an evil influence into the whole community. Religion was never considered until really just recently. Religion was never considered to be merely an individual option. What do you want to believe? Okay? Religion was always cast in the concept of a group. And so anyone who was in the group that violated the rules of the group was in effect trying to destroy the group. It's a mortal threat to the community. And so that's why they went after people that they believed to be in league with the devil of some sort, or a pagan worshiper, or things like that. They considered it, almost like a virus that comes into the community, and so they purged the virus out. That was the motivation, and a lot of the implementation of this was based on ignorance to a large extent. You had situations where, like, Galileo invented a telescope and he was able to examine the stars from a scientific point of view. Galileo never renounced his faith, was always a very devout Christian. But the church felt like anybody who was examining the stars was practicing paganism, and they had him destroy his telescope, or they were going to destroy him.
Well, even later in history,
Oh, yeah.
women
Yeah,
that practiced medicine
yes,
were accused of witchcraft.
right. If it was a healing other than divine healing, it wasn't a legitimate healing. Even though one of the primary authors of the New Testament was a physician, Dr. Luke.
But he was a man.
Well, men were accused of being warlocks too.
Oh.
So that happened as well. Okay, but not as often, oddly enough.
Well, a lot of that, I think, was just, I'm mad at you, so I'm going to accuse you of witchcraft or being a warlock and get rid of you. Or
Yes, that happened. That happened. It was a good way of getting rid of a business rival. It was if a person, like, for instance, the primary purpose of the Spanish Inquisition was not to purge evil out of the Christian community. It was to confiscate the property of Jews, and anyone who had wealth that the king felt like you weren't paying enough in your taxes. It was a form of extortion. And basically that's what the Spanish Inquisition was all about. Certainly the people who were implementing it were not very godly people. So, it's gotten, not exactly rave reviews historically in terms of representing Christ in the world. But this is part of Josiah's reform. You have to understand, Josiah's reform was devastating to anything that even hinted of paganism. And you're seeing also in this Deuteronomic text, which was found in the temple, okay? This Deuteronomic text, you'll see more and more of this, okay, you've got to come to Jerusalem for this, you've got to come to Jerusalem for that, okay? And that's where, like, for instance, the high court that they're talking about here is in Jerusalem. It's like their Supreme Court. Also, let's talk about penalties. They said whatever the penalty is that the priest or the judge prescribes, you can't deviate from that. Now, the reason why you can't deviate from that is so that the punishment should fit the crime. It shouldn't exceed the crime. So, for instance, if a person is condemned by a priest or a judge, that condemnation might not extend to their entire family. Okay? So the idea was to limit the punishment, just like in the Pentateuch we've read, part of the law was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, why did they have that? It's so that you don't take two eyes. It's so that you don't smash all the guy's teeth out. It's so that you don't kill somebody for an offense where there was an alternate punishment prescribed. It's to keep things from becoming excessive. Okay? So that what they're trying to do is to keep things limited to the judiciary and limiting personal revenge motives when it came to punishments.
Yeah, getting back to Josiah though, you saying these were Josiah's reforms, but Josiah was considered a good king.
Oh, yes.
So it raises the question, did God approve of these stoning and these, and of course the Israelites had gotten so far away with the Asherah poles and all these pagan religions that had infiltrated. And Josiah came in and was going to clean it up. And he did, and he found favor in God's eye for what he was doing. At least that's what you read in other parts.
So far.
Josiah was the 8-year-old one, right, that became king at 8 years old? Is that same one?
I think it is, yes. Yes.
I thought that was.
Yes, that's right. Okay. To your point, Vance, the question was certainly raised when Josiah was killed. Josiah was on ostensibly a diplomatic mission to the Egyptians, and there was a setup, and the Pharaoh had him assassinated. And so the people were thinking, if this is such a good guy, then how did God allow him to be assassinated? Okay, and then the kings after him went right back into paganism. Okay, so they're wondering, was God really endorsing this? And and that was one of the reasons why I think the people fell back into paganism very quickly, is that they did not see the endorsement of God in Josiah's death. Interesting how that.
Well, it's a hard concept to accept. How God lets good people die
Yes.
or be murdered, and then you've got these people that we think are bad or sorry people, and they live on and keep doing their evil and keep,
Yep.
It's like mine and Ann's friend, Kathy,
Yeah.
a wonderful, giving, loving Christian woman,
Yes.
and she's gone
Gone where?
to heaven, we hope.
There you go.
But what I'm saying is you've got some sorry person still out there living.
Yep.
And that's a hard concept.
It's kind of like the good suffer more than the sinners, like she's talking about. Keep on living in a way that's just not glorifying God.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be that person.
Yeah. But I think it's important for us as we go through these things. It's important for us to challenge how far should we be willing to go as Christians in exercising justice, and what do we do with evil in this world? And their options for what they were going to do with evil in the world were pretty limited. I mean, they did not really have prisons. The prisons in ancient times, even up to our colonial period, the only prisons that we had really were holding cells until the person could get a trial. Once they had a trial, then the penalty would be, they could hang them, or they could flog them, or they could brand them, or there was something done. but they didn't have a prison system where somebody's being held for years and years and years in a prison. Okay, prison was just a holding cell until a person had a trial, and that was, 18th century. That's not that long ago. So they didn't really have a system for prisons either. And most offenses were capital offenses anyway. So you're either walking out or you're dragged out, one way or the other. Okay, now this one is really interesting when you get into verse 14. When you've come into the land that the Lord your God has given you, have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. Fast forward to Samuel. Okay. You may indeed set over you a king whom the Lord your God will choose. Oh, how are we doing on time? I think we're done. Let's get into this next time, because this is going to be a long discussion, okay, about kings and how they're supposed to function. Okay, so thanks for being with us, and thank you very much for watching online. You can contact me at revlev at NCC UMC, MCC at ncc.umc.org. Okay.
Somebody else is getting.
Somebody else is getting. Don't say anything, Frank. Okay. See you next week.
That reminded me of the Chinese opioid epidemic and how they fixed that.